As a proud former military spouse of a specialist in the United States Army, I know firsthand that running a household on military pay can be quite difficult for lower enlisted personnel. Every month, my husband, who had opted into overdraft protection at one of the top 20 big banks, watched his pay be eaten up by $35 overdraft fees. A cycle that continued paycheck after paycheck until I, a DC licensed attorney who was stationed in California, was able to find employment after jumping through strenuous licensing requirements for the state. My husband and I are not alone. Overdraft fees are paid the most by people who can least afford them. These are fees that, one, bear no relationship to the cost banks incur in covering overdrafts, two, have the potential to explode into hundreds of dollars in fees, and three, can be near impossible to avoid for people living paycheck to paycheck. According to the research from the CFPB, overdraft fees have become a cash cow for financial institutions. In 2019, banks and credit unions charged more than $15 billion in overdraft and non-sufficient fund fees, with these fees making up a particularly large portion of smaller banks' net profits. This money is mostly made off the backs of some of America's most financially vulnerable families, disproportionately affecting communities of color. Overdraft fees are a penalty for being poor or financially insecure. Nearly 80% of overdraft fee revenue to banks come from 9% of bank accounts. The median account balance for this group is less than $350. Unexpected and high fees like overdrafts are often cited as a reason for formerly banked persons to no longer have a bank account. When a bank hits a negative balance with repeated overdraft fees, it can make it impossible for the consumer to recover, so the bank will close the account. When the account is closed, the financial institution submits the customer's name to a database that acts like a blacklist, which can prevent the customer from opening a new account elsewhere for several years. Among people with checking accounts, Black and Latino Americans are more likely than white Americans to incur overdraft fees. It is wrong that a person who is struggling to get by get exploited with a surprise $35 fee just because they inadvertently overdrew their account while buying milk.
Is it fair to say that this business model is based on making poverty a sustainably profitable enterprise?
Well, thank you, Representative Presley, for that question. And I keep going back to this point because I want to drive it in. And I wholeheartedly agree that this business model is based on making poverty a sustainably profitable enterprise. And as I stated in my testimony, nearly 80% of overdraft revenue comes from 9% of accounts with median account balances of $350 or less, making it very expensive to be poor. And just going back to the point that was made previously, it's not about choices, it's about access to resources.
Can we really trust banks that rely on overdraft fees for a majority of their income, of their net income, to voluntarily reform? Or do you agree that we need to ban overdraft and other junk fees for good?
I am extremely leery of financial institutions who in 2020 made billions of dollars in overdraft fees at one of the most vulnerable times in American history to voluntarily cease profiting from these fees. Using regulatory and legislative intervention is imperative to protect those living on the margins and from being preyed upon for financial institutions, and just to level the playing field for those who are being taken advantage of by this.